Chapter 1. The Court of Shadows. The white-hot agony in my spine felt like ground glass scraping against my bones, and right then I wanted to rip the throat out of every man in the room. What followed was a deafening roar that shook the heavy oak beams of my war room, but then the bickering voices of my council members slammed to a halt. I gripped the edges of the heavy stone table. My knuckles turned stark white. Have you ever felt pain so deep it makes your vision swim with black spots? That was my every waking moment. Yet, I hid it. I had to hide it. I masked my failing body with pure, terrifying alpha rage because a bleeding king is a dead king in our world. Without warning, a sharp spasm ripped through my lower back. I smelled their fear. I tasted their treason. I felt their greedy eyes on me. My men were watching me closely, waiting for a single slip. From there, my lead general, a bitter old wolf named Vane, slammed his fist down. Malachor is pushing the northern border again. We are losing ground. Despite that, I kept my voice a low, lethal rumble. Malachor is a coward. I pushed the words through gritted teeth. I could feel my inner wolf thrashing, clawing at my ribs in a desperate bid to take over and soothe the pain. Because of that, the air in the room grew heavy and thick. My alpha aura pushed down on them like a physical weight. Back when I was just a young warrior at the Battle of Bloodridge, I took a blast of dark magic to my spine to save a group of trapped pups. That day broke something inside me. And now, years later, that dark rot was spreading. It was a secret that would burn my kingdom to the ground if it ever got out. Who exactly was feeding Malachor our patrol routes anyway? I knew a rat lived in my walls, but I hadn't caught him yet. As the silence stretched, the heavy iron doors of the war room swung open. A breathless scout stumbled inside, his scent sour with panic. Before he could move, Vane snarled. "Speak, boy." A peace envoy, my king," the scout stammered, dropping to one knee. "From Alpha Malachor. They are waiting at the main gates." In that moment, a cold chill washed over my burning skin. Malachor didn't want peace. Malachor wanted my head on a spike. Even so, my wolf let out a deep, rumbling growl. "Let them in," I commanded. Truth be told, I knew this was a trap, but I welcomed it. I wanted to see the face of the assassin they sent to kill me. With every heartbeat, the pain in my back spiked higher, screaming at me to fall. Instead, I forced myself to stand tall. I had a feast to attend. I had a war to win. I had an assassin to break. And the night was only just beginning. Chapter 2. The Hidden Agony. By the time I reached the safety of my private chambers, the mask completely shattered. I collapsed onto the cold stone floor. My breath came out in harsh, ragged gasps. Soon after, the heavy wooden door clicked shut, and the lock turned. "My king." A soft, trembling voice echoed in the dim room. It was Silas, my ancient pack healer. He was the only soul alive who knew the truth about my broken body. Without a word, he hurried over with a wooden bowl of foul-smelling herbs and silver needles. To make things worse, simply pulling my ruined shirt off my back made me bite my lip until it bled. The dark magic scar twisted across my skin like a web of black, poisoned veins. "It is spreading faster, Kaelen," Silas whispered. He didn't use my title. He sounded terrified. I squeezed my eyes shut. I had to endure the biting pain of the silver needles because the dark magic was fighting every attempt to heal it. He cleaned the rotting wound. He stitched the torn flesh. He wrapped the tight bandages. Between one breath and the next, a fresh wave of agony hit me. "Just patch it up, old man," I grunted. "I have a feast to host." "You need rest," Silas begged. "If you push yourself tonight, you might not walk tomorrow." On the other hand, skipping the feast would prove Vane's whispers right. It would prove the king was weak. When I was a boy, my father told me a powerful story. He said that a true alpha's armor isn't made of steel to stop blades. It is made of lies to hide his breaking heart. I lived by those words every single day. Because of that, I pushed Silas away. I pushed him away because his deep pity hurt me far worse than the festering wound itself. Eventually, I dragged my heavy body off the floor. I walked toward the grand mirror. My golden eyes glowed with an unnatural, feverish heat in the dark. I grabbed my ceremonial leather armor from the bed. It was thick. It was heavy. It was perfectly designed to hide the bulky bandages wrapped tight around my ribs. Moments later, I strapped a jagged silver dagger to my thigh. My wolf paced relentlessly inside my mind. Something felt very wrong about tonight. A strange tension hung in the air, thick and electric. Why did Malachor send a peace envoy now, of all times? It made no sense. With every step I took toward the door, my spine screamed in protest, but I shoved the pain down into a dark box in my mind. Before either could speak, I turned back to the old healer. "Lock the door behind me," I ordered softly. Then I turned and walked out into the torchlit hallway, stepping directly into the Viper's Nest. Chapter 3, The Grand Feast. The moment I stepped into the Great Hall, the sheer noise nearly knocked me backward. Hundreds of wolves laughed, drank, and tore into roasted meat. Yet my senses were dialed up to a razor-sharp edge. I walked slowly toward my massive throne carved from dark wood. Every step was a carefully calculated lie to hide my limp. As if the forest watched, the massive wooden doors at the end of the hall swung wide open. The loud music instantly died. The envoy from Malachor stepped inside. It was a woman. She wore a dark hooded cloak that swallowed her shape, and a sheer black veil covered the lower half of her face. She walked with a deadly, floating grace. My wolf snapped to attention. Not only that, a very faint, sickly, sweet smell drifted through the air. I tensed my heavy jaw because the scent of nightshade poison was faint but incredibly real. She was carrying death in her hands. She stopped right at the base of my throne. In her delicate, pale hands, she held a large golden goblet filled with dark red wine, the cup of peace. "Alpha King Kaelen," she spoke. Her voice was like crushed velvet and broken glass. It sent a bizarre shiver straight down my ruined spine. What's worse, my instincts were screaming at me to rip her head off. I prepared to kill her right there because protecting my pack is my absolute, only purpose in this brutal life. I slowly wrapped my fingers around the hilt of my dagger. "I bring a gift from Malachor," she said softly. "A peace offering?" I mocked, my voice a deep, vibrating rumble. "Drink it first, then." As the silence roared in the grand hall, she completely froze. She didn't expect that. She didn't know what scared her more, my burning gaze or the poison in her hands. But she slowly reached up to remove her veil, and just like that, everything changed. The black silk fell away. My heart literally stopped beating in my chest. She had midnight hair and eyes like violent thunderstorms. They say fated mates strike like wild lightning, burning away your entire old life in a single terrifying flash. I always thought it was a stupid myth told to pups. Until right now. Her scent hit me. Her eyes locked on mine. Her soul called directly to my hidden wolf. As the bond pulsed, an invisible, scorching tether snapped into place between our chests. It was so forceful it knocked the breath right out of my lungs. Mine. Mine. But then, I saw the sheer terror in her storm cloud eyes. She knew. She felt it too. Her hand trembled wildly. She looked down at the poisoned cup meant for my throat. Between them, something cracked. She looked back up at me, a tragic, broken smile touching her lips. And before I could even blink, she lifted the golden goblet and drank the deadly poison herself. Chapter 4, The Poisoned Chalice. Her world tilted. The heavy golden goblet slipped from her pale, trembling fingers. It hit the hard stone floor with a loud, ringing clang that shattered the silence. The wine spilled like dark blood. The crowd gasped in pure shock. My entire world completely stopped. I lunged forward over the heavy oak table because my mate was dying right in front of me. The heavy plates crashed, the metal cups clattered. I didn't care about the mess or the staring eyes of my counsel. Without thinking, my body moved on instinct. I crashed to the cold floor right beside her. As if pulled by a string, I scooped her small, fragile body into my massive arms. Her skin was already turning a sickening shade of gray. Her beautiful storm cloud eyes were rolling back into her head. I saw a warrior drink nightshade once during the brutal winter wars. It was an ugly, agonizing death that turned a strong man's hot veins into black ice. I absolutely refused to let that happen to her. "Healers!" I roared. The deafening sound tore through the massive hall. Why did she do it? Why did a highly trained assassin drink her own deadly poison? She came here to end my life. Deep down, she knew the truth. She chose to suffer and die, rather than harm her true fated mate, which meant my lonely life was now permanently and violently tied to hers. "Hold on. Please hold on," I whispered. My deep voice actually broke. As her wolf stirred, a sudden, terrifying freeze hit my own broad chest. I gasped out loud for air because a sharp, icy agony stabbed directly into my own lungs. It wasn't my physical pain. It was hers. What was this twisted, terrifying magic? My own ruined spine flared up in hot protest, but I ignored it. We were actually sharing physical sensations. Before I could move, General Vane stepped aggressively in my way. "My king, drop her! She is an enemy spy!" With a single glance, I made the old general step back in sheer terror. "She is mine!" And just like that, the ruthless Alpha King broke every single law to save a beautiful killer. Chapter 5: The Ward of Secrets. Meanwhile, the Royal Medical Ward was drowning in pure chaotic panic. I paced the bloody stone floor because the wild adrenaline was burning a massive hole in my mind. The sharp, stinging smell of crushed bitter roots and raw healing magic filled my sensitive nose. That's why I couldn't sit still. Silas, my old healer, was working frantically over her pale, lifeless body. His wrinkled hands glowed with a soft green light. As the sky darkened outside the tall glass windows, my own body started to betray me again. The air thickened. Every single time her fragile heartbeat stuttered on the bed, my own heavy chest seized up in brutal, crushing sympathy. I gripped the edge of a wooden table until the thick wood snapped under my fingers. "Breathe! Damn it! Breathe!" I snarled at the empty shadows. When I was just a young pup, I watched two soul-bonded wolves die together on a bloody battlefield. When one warrior took a fatal arrow to the neck, the other warrior bled out from a massive phantom wound. It was a beautiful, terrifying curse. Now, I was living it. The moment their eyes locked, Silas looked up at me with sheer, unhidden panic. "The poison is deep, my king," he choked out, wiping sweat from his forehead. But there is something else inside her. What could possibly be worse than deadly nightshade? I felt the freezing cold. I felt the dark, crawling magic. I felt the invisible, suffocating chains wrapped tightly around her soul. She was bound by a lethal, magical blood oath because Malachor owned her very soul. If she didn't kill me, the dark magic would slowly eat her alive from the inside out. Her body moved on instinct, thrashing wildly on the narrow bed. As if fate demanded it, she let out a broken, agonizing scream in her sleep. Without another word, my own injured back arched in explosive, fiery agony. The dark magic in her veins was violently reacting with the dark magic scarring my spine. As the echo faded, I fell hard to my knees, biting down hard on my own arm to stop a furious roar. We were physically linked in the most dangerous way possible. A broken king and a dying killer, chained by pain, bleeding together in the dark. Chapter 6: Crossing the Threshold. Come morning, the ancient castle was a buzzing, angry hive of vicious rumors. Rather than throwing her down into the cold, wet dungeons where prisoners belong, I carried her unconscious body up the grand, winding stairs. My muscles screamed in absolute agony with every heavy step. So I brought her straight to my impregnable private chambers because I trusted absolutely no one in this castle right now. I gently laid her down on my massive, soft, fur-covered bed. As the truth unraveled, my angry council members gathered loudly outside my heavy oak door. They demanded immediate answers. They demanded swift justice. They demanded her blood. Because of that, I stomped over to the door and cracked it open just enough to show my glowing golden eyes. "She is under my strict personal interrogation," I barked fiercely. "Anyone who touches her dies." Without a second thought, I slammed the heavy door right in my lead general's face and locked it tight. Was I completely losing my mind? Was I risking my entire powerful kingdom for a mysterious stranger who wanted me dead? At the same time, a soft, painful groan drifted from the large bed behind me. As her pulse raced, I slowly turned around to face my beautiful nightmare. The bright morning sunlight hit her pale, flawless face. Her long, dark eyelashes fluttered softly. The intoxicating smell of fresh rain and sweet jasmine slowly filled my entire room, calming my angry wolf. In the quiet that followed, her stunning storm cloud eyes slowly opened. Her chest visibly ached as she took a deep breath, and I instantly felt the exact same phantom tightness in my own bruised ribs. Time stood still. She looked around the giant, unfamiliar royal room. She stared at the heavy iron lock on the thick door. Then, her wide eyes locked directly onto mine. She realized she had completely failed her deadly mission, and now she was locked in a cage with the monster she was sent to destroy. Chapter 7. The Interrogation. Her breath caught. She pushed herself up against the massive oak headboard, pulling the thick fur blankets up to her chin. What followed was a tense, heavy silence that stretched across my bedroom. I slowly walked toward her. I needed to break her silence because my whole pack was in grave danger. Who exactly opened the eastern side gate for her arrival anyway? I still had to solve that deadly puzzle. Her voice trembled. "Where am I?" she whispered. Rather, I ignored her question. "Malachor sent you," I growled low in my chest. "Why?" As the silence stretched, she lifted her chin in pure defiance. She looked so small, yet so fierce. Her storm cloud eyes were completely guarded. Without thinking, I stepped closer to the bed. I let my heavy alpha aura roll out into the room. I wanted to press down on her instincts and force her to submit. But then, disaster struck. Pushing my aura that hard made my injured back violently twist. Between one breath and the next, a white-hot spike of agony tore through my spine. Because of that, I flinched hard and gripped the bedpost. My vision actually flashed red. At the same time, she gasped loudly on the bed. As if pulled by a string, her small hands flew to her own lower back. Her face twisted in pure, shocking pain. She was feeling the exact fiery rot inside my own body. She felt it, clear as day. You are broken," she choked out. The space between them burned. My ultimate, shameful secret was totally exposed. I fought for my pack. I fought for my pride. I fought for my mate. But now, she knew my armor was completely fake. Before the words left her lips, I stepped back, cutting off my alpha power. "Do not speak of this," I snarled, my chest heaving. In the quiet that followed, she just stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. She saw the monster, but she also saw the bleeding man underneath. With every heartbeat, the invisible bond between us pulsed loudly. She was my deadly prisoner, but now, I was totally at her mercy. Chapter 8. The Feedback Loop. Come morning, the golden sun mocked my dark mood. I left her locked in my room to join my soldiers in the dusty courtyard. I had to show extreme strength because my council was already whispering about a new king. Moments later, General Vane tossed me a heavy iron training sword. "Show us how a true alpha fights," Vane barked out loudly. Under the weight of his stare, I gripped the rough leather handle. I saw a wild bear get caught in a steel trap once. The beast chewed off its own bloody foot just to escape. Right now, I felt just like that wild, desperate bear. I was trapped by my own weak body. Next, a massive young warrior rushed at me with a battle axe. I swung my heavy sword hard because Vane needed to see me fight. Metal crashed against metal. The loud clang echoed off the high stone walls. Without warning, the dark magic inside my scar violently ripped open. My spine simply gave out. I dropped the heavy iron sword in the dirt. I fell hard to one knee, gasping for sweet air. What's worse, a sharp scream echoed from the tall tower window above us. Through our mate bond, I felt her legs completely collapse. She fell hard onto the rug inside my bedroom because my spine flared with wildfire. Our pain was one and the same. While the forest held its breath, Vane stepped closer with a nasty sneer. "Are you unwell, my king?" Instead, I forced myself to stand up, ignoring the shooting stars in my eyes. "I am done training," I grunted, limping away. That's why I rushed back into the dark stone castle. I left my shocked men behind. I had to reach her. I had to know if my stupid pride just killed my fated mate. But as I climbed the winding stairs, a strange smell hit my nose. It smelled like cheap iron and sour sweat. Something inside her shifted. I could feel her sheer panic radiating through our tight bond. She was not alone in my room, and just like that, the real game finally began. Chapter 9. Blood in the Corridors. Before either could speak, I kicked the heavy oak door completely off its iron hinges. The wood splintered and crashed into the room. A tall, masked castle guard was standing right over her bed. He held a long silver dagger high in the air. He slipped inside the castle because someone on my council gave him the keys. Malachor never sends just one assassin. When I was a young pup, my uncle caught a raven stealing fresh meat. He told me that filthy spies always hunt in pairs. He was right. In the span of a breath, I roared and leaped across the large room. I tackled the traitor right to the floor. We rolled across the soft rug, throwing heavy punches. Blood sprayed across the gray stones. As if fate demanded it, the traitor kneed me directly in my ruined spine. My world tilted. The sudden explosive agony paralyzed my arms and legs. I collapsed flat on my back, completely helpless. The assassin stood over me. He raised his shiny blade to slice my throat open. Her body moved on instinct. Before he could move, she lunged off the bed like a wild shadow. She grabbed a sharp piece of broken wood from the smashed door. With a single glance, she drove the jagged wood straight into the assassin's neck. The traitor gurgled, dropping his silver knife. He fell totally dead beside me. As the tension broke, she dropped to her knees right next to my head. Her small hands shook violently. She was breathing so fast. She saved my life because the mate bond was much stronger than her dark brainwashing. Yet, I noticed something strange as her nightgown slipped down. A strange, black mark shaped like a spider rested on her collarbone. What did that dark symbol even mean? Her voice trembled. I didn't want him to hurt you." As the echo faded, I slowly reached up and touched her soft, warm cheek. Truth be told, she was sent to kill me. She was ordered to ruin my kingdom. She was supposed to be my ultimate downfall. More importantly, she just fought her own people to save my broken life. As her wolf pressed forward, I knew there was no going back now. The war had finally come right inside my home. Chapter 10. The Ticking Clock. The suffocating grip of pure terror wrapped around my throat like a frozen iron chain. Before I could move, Sarah let out a terrible, blood-curdling scream. Because of that, I dropped the dead assassin's bleeding body and rushed straight to her side. The black spider mark on her smooth chest was actually glowing. It burned with a sickly, dark purple light. She just killed a man from her own pack to save me, which meant she had officially broken her dark, magical blood oath to Malachor. As the magic twisted inside her, I felt a massive, crushing weight slam directly onto my own lungs. What followed was a desperate race against the ticking clock. "Stay with me!" I roared out loud. Without thinking, My body moved purely on instinct. I scooped her thrashing, feverish body into my massive arms. I carried her quickly down the winding, damp stone stairs because I desperately needed the forbidden royal archives. I remembered an old tragic story my mother once told me about a cursed alpha who walked directly into the fire to save his dying mate. She said that ancient blood magic always leaves a dark stain, but every curse has a hidden key. I absolutely had to find that magical key right now. As the silence stretched in the dark underground library, I laid her gently on a large, dusty oak table. Meanwhile, I started ripping heavy, dusty books off the tall wooden shelves. Dust flew everywhere, stinging my eyes and nose. Have you ever felt entirely helpless while watching the only person you love slip away? It is a sickening, hollow feeling. It destroys a strong man from the inside out. To make things worse, her breathing grew shallow and raspy. The sour smell of burning ozone and rotting leaves completely filled the cold room. Deep down, she knew the truth. "It hurts," she whimpered softly, clutching her chest. By the time I found the massive, black leather book of forbidden magic, my big hands were violently shaking. I flipped frantically through the crispy, yellowed pages. I searched for a magical cure because losing her would literally stop my own heart from beating. Eventually, my rough finger stopped on a terrifying, faded passage. The ancient text said the oath could only be broken by death. It required the death of the cruel master or the death of the bound servant. Was there another hidden way to trick the dark magic without anyone actually dying? That was a terrifying secret I didn't have the answer to yet. In that moment, a massive wave of dark magic pulsed from her chest, knocking me backward into the heavy shelves. And just like that, the real nightmare finally began. Chapter 11: The Midpoint Shift. The air thickened until it felt exactly like trying to breathe underwater. As if the forest watched, the magical punishment inside her small body finally reached its brutal, agonizing peak. She went into wild, violent convulsions on the hard wooden table. Her beautiful storm-cloud eyes rolled completely back into her head. Without another word, I ripped my heavy leather armor right off my chest. I tossed my silver dagger clattering to the floor. I knew exactly what I had to do because the ancient magic required a massive, pure sacrifice to calm its angry storm. In the span of a breath, I climbed onto the table and pulled her freezing body directly against my bare, burning chest. "Take my strength," I whispered fiercely into her dark hair. As the bond pulsed, I pushed my massive alpha aura out of my body and directly into hers. What's worse, the dark magic fought back like a cornered, rabid wolf. It clawed viciously at my mind. It burned my bare skin. It ripped into my ruined spine with fiery, invisible teeth. I absorbed the heavy brunt of her dark curse because my fated mate bond demanded it. Time stood still as our bodies fought the invisible war. I gave her my warmth. I gave her my strength. I gave her my heart. Eventually, the violent shaking slowly stopped. The glowing black spider mark on her skin slowly faded back to a dull, flat gray. Between one breath and the next, she gasped loudly for sweet, fresh air. Her heavy eyelids fluttered open. She was completely exhausted, covered in a thin sheen of cold sweat. But then, her soft hands felt the massive, jagged ridges of my ruined back. As the truth unraveled, she slowly pushed herself up to look directly at my bare spine. The black, rotting magic scars looked exactly like an ugly lightning strike across my thick muscles. I was the great Alpha King, totally stripped of all my fake regal pretense. I couldn't hide my broken pieces from her anymore. Her breath caught. "Who did this to you?" she whispered softly. Truth be told, I never showed anyone the real monster hiding under my skin. With every heartbeat, I waited for her to run away in total disgust. Instead, she gently traced the darkest, ugliest scar with her small fingers. A soft, warm, healing spark leaped from her gentle touch into my painful skin. "I survived a massive massacre," I told her, my voice breaking slightly. "But a huge piece of me died on that bloody battlefield." As the sky darkened outside the tall windows, She leaned forward and softly pressed her warm, plump lips against my ugliest scar. Her chest visibly ached. "You are not broken," she murmured against my skin. "You are still fighting." The space between them burned with a profound, sizzling heat that completely melted years of my icy isolation. I turned her slowly in my strong arms, pulling her plush lips up to mine. Our first kiss was not gentle. It was a hungry, desperate collision of teeth and heat. She tasted like sweet wine and absolute danger. I gripped her soft waist, pulling her flush against my hard chest. She let out a soft, breathy moan that shot straight to my core, which meant we were finally ready to face the entire dangerous world together. Chapter 12. The Council's Ultimatum. The moment their eyes locked, the heavy library doors suddenly smashed open. General Vane stormed into the dark, dusty room, surrounded by 10 fully armed royal guards. As if summoned, I instantly shoved Sarah right behind my broad back, completely shielding her exposed skin from their prying, greedy eyes. "What is the meaning of this?" I roared, my alpha voice shaking the dusty bookshelves. Because of that, the heavily armed guards actually took a fearful step backward. But General Vane stood his ground, his wrinkled face twisted in pure, ugly rage. "The castle is in total chaos," Vane shouted loudly. "We found a dead guard in your private chambers. And now we find you down here hiding with the enemy spy." Under the weight of his stare, I quickly pulled my heavy shirt back over my ruined shoulders. What followed was the absolute most dangerous political standoff of my entire life. "She is not a spy," I snarled deeply. "She killed the traitor who tried to end my life." Still, Vane wasn't listening at all. He aggressively pulled his shiny silver sword from its long scabbard. "She is from Malicor's pack," Vane yelled out. "The Royal Council demands her immediate execution. We will not follow a weak, mad king who sleeps with venomous snakes." As the tension broke, I felt a sharp, cold sting of total betrayal. My own lead general was officially turning my loyal army directly against me. Did Vane secretly hire the assassin in my room? That was another highly dangerous question bouncing around my angry mind. Before either could speak, Sarah stepped slowly out from behind me. She stood tall and proud, wrapping my dark leather cloak tightly around her small shoulders. Her storm cloud eyes flashed with dangerous, wild lightning. "If you want my blood, come and take it," she challenged them softly. Her voice trembled slightly, but her spirit was exactly like pure steel. In that moment, I realized I couldn't play these stupid, quiet political games anymore. I couldn't hide in the dark shadows while my pack completely fell apart. With his scent in the air, I drew my own massive iron sword. The heavy steel sang a deadly, sharp song. "Listen to me very carefully," I growled, letting my eyes flare bright, glowing gold. I projected my booming voice. I projected my fury. I projected my absolute, undeniable power. Because of that, the entire library fell dead silent. "She is not a prisoner," I declared loudly for every single man to hear. "She is my fated mate. She is your future queen." As the echo faded, the royal guards gasped in total shock, completely lowering their shiny weapons. Even so, General Vane looked at me with pure, disgusting hatred. He slammed his sword back into its sheath and spat right on the dusty floor. "You have doomed us all, Kaelen," Vane hissed sharply. Without another word, the old general turned around and marched angrily out of the royal library. I challenged my pride. I challenged my council. I challenged my entire kingdom. And just like that, the final deadly countdown to absolute war began. Chapter 13. The Shadow King arrives. Without warning, the gates shattered. Malicor stepped through the smoke like a dark god of war. His eyes weren't just gold. They were black holes of void magic. Every wolf in the courtyard whimpered and fell to their knees. He didn't even look at them. He only had eyes for me. "Kaelen," he sneered, his voice scraping against my mind. "Look at you. Broken, bleeding, a king of nothing." I tried to stand, but my spine refused to obey. I stayed down because the dark magic in my scar was screaming in response to his presence. My pack was being slaughtered around me. Why did I ever think I could hide my weakness from a monster like him? Sarah? He turned his gaze to her, his lips curling into a cruel smirk. My perfect little weapon. Did you forget who owns your soul? She stepped in front of me, her body shaking, but her spirit stood like a mountain. She didn't answer him. She just growled, a raw, primal sound that came from the deepest part of her wolf. Despite that, Malachor laughed. It was a cold, hollow sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. You think this bond saves you? It only makes you easier to break. Because of that, the air around us began to twist. He raised a hand, and the ground erupted in black spikes. We were trapped. We fought for the stone walls. We fought for the history. We fought for each other. Yet, we were losing. The spikes sliced through the air, inches from our faces. We have to move, Sarah whispered, her eyes locked on his. I grabbed her hand. My heart pounded against my ribs. Can you run? She looked at me, and I saw her wolf shining through her eyes, bright, wild, and unafraid. She pulled me up because the bond between us demanded it. I will carry you if I have to, she said. We turned and sprinted toward the postern gate, the last exit. Malachor didn't chase us yet. He stood there, watching, savoring our fear. He let us run. He wanted us to believe we had a chance. Soon after, we burst into the dark, tangled woods. Behind us, the keep roared with flames. The fire ate the wood. The fire ate the history. The fire ate my heart. I glanced back one last time. Where was Vane? I had seen him standing near Malachor, his face unreadable. Was he the one who let the Shadow King in? The loop remained open, a stinging mystery that burned worse than my back. We were running for our lives, but the trap was already closing around us. Chapter 14, The Bitter Retreat. Before long, the forest swallowed us whole. The trees were dense, their branches like gnarled fingers trying to catch our hair and clothes. Because of that, I could barely keep my footing. My legs felt like lead. Each step sent shards of glass up my spine. I gripped a rough tree trunk, my chest heaving. Go, I wheezed. Save yourself. Sarah spun around, her eyes blazing. Never. She didn't ask me to be strong. She just put my arm over her shoulder. She was small, but she was solid as the earth. She led us deeper into the dark, where the moonlight couldn't reach. Meanwhile, the howls started. Malachor's hunters were loose. They were fast. They were hungry. Why does he want us so badly? She asked, her voice tight with panic. I looked at the black spider mark on her collarbone. It was pulsing again, rhythmic and steady. It was a beacon. He hunted us because he could track her soul. We left because we had no choice, but running was only a temporary fix. In the heat of the moment, I realized the truth. As long as we kept running, we were prey. Stop, I said, stumbling to a halt. She looked at me, breathless. Kaelen, we have to fight, I interrupted, gripping her shoulders. He wants us to run until we break. If we stop, we choose the ground. If we choose the ground, we can win. She paused. Her eyes searched mine, looking for the doubt but finding only fire. She nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. But then, a branch snapped nearby. A low growl vibrated in the damp soil. They had caught our scent. We need a place to hide, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Somewhere he can't track the mark. The Cave of Spirits, I said, a plan forming in the smoke of my mind. We needed to find the strength. We needed to find the truth. We needed to find the peace. But first we had to survive the night. I held her close, feeling her warmth against my cold, aching skin. The bond pulsed, a steady, golden rhythm. It was the only thing that felt real in this nightmare. The woods were filled with eyes, watching, waiting for us to falter. I looked at her and I knew, even if we died here, we would die together. But I wasn't ready to die. Not today, not with her. Chapter 15. The Point of No Return. Truth be told, I knew the Cave of Spirits was dangerous. It was a place where the barrier between life and death grew thin. Despite that, it was our only chance. As we climbed the slick, rocky slope, I felt the mark on her neck burning. Malachor was close. He was playing with us. He's testing us, I muttered. Sarah didn't look back. She pushed through the briars, her skin bleeding, her focus absolute. She was a different woman now. The assassin was gone. The queen was rising. What's worse, the path narrowed. One wrong step meant a fall into the dark abyss below. I chose her because she made me want to fight for a future, not just survive the past. Almost there, she called out. The cave entrance was a jagged tear in the mountainside. Inside, it smelled of ancient earth and ozone. It was quiet. Too quiet. I leaned against the cave wall, gasping for air. The pain in my back was a constant, dull roar. The mark, I said, pointing to her neck. If we cover it with the cave's dust, can he still find us? I think so, she said, scraping the glowing gray powder from the walls. She pressed it onto the mark. The light flickered and died. For a moment, the world felt still. But then, the cave entrance darkened. Malachor stood there, blocking the stars. You think a little dust can hide you from me? He asked. He didn't run. He didn't rush. He walked toward us, his footsteps heavy and slow. You are mine, Sarah, he hissed. You have always been mine. I stood up. I didn't reach for my sword. I didn't reach for my rage. I reached for the bond. She is not yours, I said, my voice steady. She is the queen. I looked at Sarah. She looked at me. In that moment, we understood. The bond wasn't just a connection. It was a weapon. Are you ready? I asked. She took my hand. Her touch was electric. Always. We didn't run. We stepped forward, into the dark. As the cave swallowed the light, I realized we were at the point of no return. There would be no more hiding. There would be no more running. The next time we saw the sun, it would be over one of our dead bodies. Let him come, I growled. The wolf inside me finally answered. I was broken, I was bleeding, but I was a king, and I was going to protect my queen, or burn the world down trying. The final test had begun. Chapter 16, The Shattered Shield. Without warning, Malachor moved like a blur of ink and cold malice. He didn't use a sword. He used the cave itself. He slammed his hand against the stone floor, and massive, jagged spikes of black void magic erupted from the earth. As if the forest watched, one of the spikes drove directly into my thigh, pinning me to the floor. I roared in agony, my hand reaching for my blade, but the dark magic burned my skin like acid. Kaelen! Sarah screamed, her voice tearing through the stillness. She lunged toward me, her hands glowing with a soft, desperate light, but Malachor flicked his wrist. A wave of force slammed her into the far wall. She slumped to the ground unconscious. My heart hammered against my ribs, wild, trapped, and terrified. Because of that, the entire world narrowed down to her motionless form. I forgot the pain. I forgot the war. I forgot the crown. I only saw my mate, broken because I failed to be strong enough to keep her safe. In that moment, Malachor walked slowly toward me. His boots crunched on the cave floor. The sound echoed like a death knell. He stopped inches from my face. He leaned down, his breath smelling of decay and old dried blood. Look at you, he whispered, a cruel smile twisting his thin lips. The great king, reduced to a crawling dog. He reached out and grabbed my chin, forcing me to look up at him. I wanted to bite his fingers off. I wanted to tear the world apart. Still, my body was a cage of needles and broken bone. The void magic seeped into my spinal wound, turning my fire into absolute freezing numbness. I am going to take her back to my compound, he said, his voice smooth as silk. and I am going to make her watch as I burn your kingdom to ash." What's worse, he kicked my hand away, leaving me pinned and helpless in the dirt. My vision blurred. I felt the pack's hope dying in my mind. I felt my own soul fracturing under the weight of my uselessness. Between one breath and the next, he picked up Sarah's limp body and tossed her over his shoulder like a sack of grain. As if the world narrowed, my pulse slowed. The darkness crept into the edges of my sight. I failed her. I failed the pack. I failed the throne. Before the words left his lips, Malachor turned his back on me. He walked toward the exit, his shadow stretching long and terrifying across the cave walls. And just like that, the light in my life went out. Chapter 17, The Weight of Silence. Meanwhile, the cave grew deathly cold. I dragged my body across the rough stones, clawing for a hold, but my legs were dead weight. Truth be told, the silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It screamed of my failure. It shouted of my weakness. It roared of my end. Because of that, I let my head fall back against the hard wall. I was alone. I was broken. I was a king without a crown or a mate. As the bond pulsed, I reached out through the mental tether, hoping for a spark of her fear, a hint of her presence. Nothing. He had severed the link. Or even worse, he had suppressed it with his dark magic, leaving me in a prison of my own mind. I stared at the empty space where she had been. The air still held the faint, sweet scent of her, rain and jasmine, but it was fading fast. Maybe it was fate. Maybe I was never meant to be a king. Maybe I was only meant to be a warning. As my thoughts spun, I thought of Vane. I thought of the council. I thought of the lives lost in the burning keep. They were all dead because I tried to keep a secret. I lived a lie. I protected a lie. And in the end, the lie destroyed everything I ever loved. In the stillness that followed, I felt the familiar, bitter taste of self-loathing. I was an alpha who couldn't protect his pack. I was a mate who couldn't save his partner. I was a man who couldn't even stand on his own 2 feet. What a pathetic end to a pathetic reign. As the echo faded, I closed my eyes. The cold was sinking into my marrow, numbing the pain in my spine. It was almost peaceful. No more councils, no more wars, no more secrets. Just the dark, quiet earth and the weight of my own sins. I deserved this. I deserved the silence. And as the last of my strength drained into the dusty floor, I let the darkness have me. Chapter 18, The Lowest Point. With every heartbeat, the crushing guilt became a physical weight. I was lying in the dirt, dreaming of a life that never happened. I saw a throne that was never mine. I saw a mate who was never saved. Suddenly, a faint, rhythmic thumping shook the cave. It wasn't the sound of footsteps. It was the sound of a heartbeat. My heart. Because of that, I jerked awake, coughing on the dry dust. I was still here. I hadn't died. The universe wasn't even kind enough to grant me that mercy. I looked up at the cave ceiling. The stalactites hung like rows of jagged teeth. "She is waiting," I whispered, my voice sounding like gravel. Still, my body wouldn't move. My legs were dead. The void magic was still coiled around my spine, eating the last of my resolve. I reached for the bond again. I pushed. I strained. I threw every ounce of my will into the dark, empty space where she used to be. Sarah. Nothing. Just the hollow echo of my own longing. Deep down, I knew the truth. She was terrified. She was hurt. And she was blaming herself just as I was. As my bones remembered him, the man I used to be before the war, before the mask, I wept. I didn't care who heard. I didn't care about the king. I was a man who had lost his home, his heart, and his soul. What's worse, I realized I had been wrong about everything. I thought strength was about never showing pain. I thought love was about protection. I was wrong. Strength was about admitting you needed help. Love was about trusting someone enough to let them see you fall. I failed her. I failed to trust her. I failed to give her the truth before it was too late. I let my head hit the dirt again. This was the end. The fire was out. The pack was scattered. The queen was in chains. I was a king of dust and ashes, waiting for the shadows to finish the job they started. As the cave stood silent, I felt the last flickers of my hope die away, leaving me in a darkness so thick it felt like a grave. Chapter 19. The Ember in the Ash. The darkness in the cave was absolute, but the silence had a texture. It tasted like metallic despair. I lay there, waiting for the cold to stop my heart, when I felt it. A pulse. It was faint, like the beat of a dying moth, but it was there, deep in the marrow of my bones. A tether. Sarah was alive. She's alive. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I hadn't lost her. She was still fighting, somewhere in the dark, and my wallowing was just another way of abandoning her. Because of that, the self-loathing that had been eating me alive suddenly curdled into something else. It transformed into a cold, hard, razor-sharp fury. I was a king, but I was also a wolf. And a wolf doesn't lay down to die when its mate is in the jaws of a predator. A wolf tears the predator apart. I closed my eyes and reached inward, past the pain, past the paralysis, past the dark magic that Malachor had coiled around my spine. I found the little ember of my wolf, the part of me that the massacre at Bloodridge hadn't killed. It was buried under years of regal duty and alpha restraint. I had been acting like a statue, trying to hold up a crumbling empire. But statues don't heal. Statues don't hunt. I breathed in, letting the scent of the cold, damp cave fill my lungs. I didn't reach for my authority. I didn't reach for my crown. I reached for the rage. "You think you've broken me, Malachor?" I hissed into the dark, the sound echoing off the wet stone. The spark ignited. It wasn't the warm, comfortable light of a king's hearth. It was a wildfire. Chapter 20. The Purge. What followed was the most agonizing experience of my life. To break the void magic, I had to burn it out. I couldn't cut it away. I had to force my own inner wolf to consume it, even if it meant tearing my own body to pieces in the process. I gritted my teeth, biting my lip until it bled, and pushed my energy down my spine. The void magic shrieked. It felt like liquid nitrogen being pumped through my nerves, colliding with the inferno of my wolf fire. I arched my back, my muscles locking in a violent, spasming cramp that made my vision strobe with white light. Fight. I pushed harder. The magic fought back, trying to anchor itself to my broken vertebrae, but I shredded it with my will. I let the wolf take the wheel. I didn't try to control the rage. I let it consume me. My spine cracked, a loud, sickening sound in the stillness as the bones shifted, forcing the dark residue out. I screamed, a primal sound that tore the throat out of the silence. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the searing heat vanished. I slumped back against the cave wall, drenched in sweat, gasping for air that tasted like freedom. I couldn't walk yet, but I could feel my legs. The numbness was gone, replaced by a dull, throbbing pain that told me I was still whole. I pulled myself up, my fingers digging into the stone. I was weak, I was bleeding, and I was starving, but I was awake. I dragged my body toward the mouth of the cave, leaving a trail of blood and broken magic in my wake. I wasn't just Kaelen, the king of lies, anymore. I was the hunter, and I was coming for the head of the man who dared to touch my queen. Chapter 21. The Return of the Exile. The sun was rising over the peaks, painting the world in shades of blood and gold. I stood at the entrance of the cave, leaning heavily against a jagged rock. My leather armor was shredded, my hair was matted with grime, and my eyes, I could feel them glowing with an unnatural predatory hunger. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, but they were strong. Truth be told, I knew the kingdom wouldn't recognize me. They were used to the refined, stoic king who sat on a throne of ice. They wouldn't recognize the man who had been gutted by his own secrets and reborn in the dirt. But I didn't care about their recognition. I didn't care about their whispers. I turned my face toward the distant, smoke-stained silhouette of Malicor's compound. The bond was still there, faint, tethered to her fear, but getting stronger the more I focused. She was alive. She was waiting. I stepped out onto the path, my stride heavy but sure. "I am coming for you, Sarah," I promised into the wind. Behind me, the cave of spirits fell silent again, but the ground where I had lain was scorched black. I left my old life behind in those ashes. I was going to war. I didn't need an army. I didn't need a council. I just needed the steel in my hand and the wolf in my blood. The king was dead. The Alpha had returned. Chapter 22. The Gates of Hell. Malicor's compound sat in the valley like a festering wound. It didn't look like a castle. It looked like a tomb. I didn't sneak in. I didn't wait for nightfall. I walked through the main gate, my boots crunching on the gravel, my iron sword drawn and singing in the wind. 2 sentries lunged at me. I didn't waste breath on warnings. I moved with a speed that felt like a fever dream, my wolf finally off the leash. I cut one down before he could raise his spear, and I drove my shoulder into the second, throwing him aside like a rag doll. I was a man possessed. I was a man who had nothing left to lose. Truth be told, I wasn't just fighting for my pack anymore. I was fighting for the version of me that deserved to love her. I was fighting for the Kaelen who didn't need to hide behind a mask of stone. As I reached the inner sanctum, the doors flew open. I was covered in blood. Not all of it mine. I looked like a demon walking out of a nightmare, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I was the Alpha. I was the king. And I was coming for blood. "Malicor!" I roared, the sound echoing off the stone ceilings. There was no trickery left. No more quiet politics. Just the raw, jagged truth of steel and hate. The guards hesitated, sensing the shift in the air. They knew a dead man when they saw one. I walked forward, and the path parted. I was the storm, and they were just leaves. Chapter 23, The Throne of Lies. I found them in the heart of the fortress. Malicor sat on a throne carved of obsidian, his hands folded. Sarah was chained to a pillar nearby, her dark hair tangled, her skin pale, but her storm-cloud eyes were burning with a light that didn't know how to die. When she saw me, her breath hitched. "Kaelen," she whispered, her voice a fragile melody in the dark room. Malicor stood up, his smile thin and sharp as a razor. "You survived the cave. I suppose I should have expected nothing less from a dying breed." He gestured to the guards, and they swarmed toward me. This time, I didn't hesitate. I used the bond. I didn't just feel her fear. I felt her resolve. I pulled the strength from our connection, letting the energy of our fated mate link flood my aching muscles. I fought like a whirlwind. My movements were fluid, precise, and lethal. I took a hit to the ribs, a graze to the arm, but I kept moving. I was not the king who hid his pain. I was the king who used it. "You think you can save her?" Malicor hissed, his hands beginning to glow with that sickly violet void magic. He didn't wait. He launched a blast of dark energy at me. I didn't dodge. I took it square in the chest. It knocked the air from my lungs and burned my skin, but I kept my feet planted. I laughed, a raw, jagged sound. "I'm not saving her, Malicor," I snarled, stepping through the dissipating smoke, my eyes blazing like liquid gold. "I'm giving her the chance to finish you." I reached out and smashed the magical shackles holding Sarah to the pillar. The metal shattered like glass. She hit the floor, snatched a fallen blade, and rose. We stood back to back, a wall of fur and steel. Chapter 24. The Fated Union. The room felt like it was shrinking. Malicor threw everything he had at us. Shadows, void spikes, dark whispers that clawed at our minds. But he didn't understand the bond. He thought it was a tether that made us weak. He didn't see that it was a circuit. "Together," I shouted. We didn't just coordinate our attacks. We merged our consciousness. I saw what she saw. She felt what I felt. When Malicor struck left, I moved right, and she was already there, driving her blade into the gap in his defenses. We were a single, terrifying entity. "This is impossible!" Malachor screamed, his composure finally cracking. He tried to unleash a massive wave of dark magic, a final purge to destroy the whole room. But he had made one fatal error. He had tried to feed on our energy. As the dark wave hit us, we didn't push back. We opened the bond. We acted as a conduit, pulling his void magic into our connection. It was like trying to swallow a star. The magic rushed through us, but instead of breaking us, it illuminated us. We focused the dark energy, purified it through the bond, and shoved it right back at him. The blast hit Malachor with the force of a collapsing sun. He didn't scream. He simply dissolved into shadow, his throne exploding into dust behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and sweet. We stood in the center of the ruins, chests heaving, blood dripping from our wounds. But we were standing. We were together. Chapter 25, The New Dawn. The morning sun hit the ruins of the compound, casting a golden light over the valley. The war was over. The Shadow King was gone. I looked at Sarah. She was covered in dust, her clothes torn, her face smeared with soot, and she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I walked over to her, ignoring the throbbing pain in my own body. I didn't reach for my crown. I didn't have one, not anymore. I just reached for her hand. "The kingdom will need a king," she said softly, leaning into my touch. "It doesn't need a king of lies," I replied, my voice steady for the first time in years. "It needs someone who knows what it costs to be human." I looked out over the horizon. The rebuilding would take time. The council would be angry. The pack would be confused. But for the first time, I didn't fear the future. I wasn't hiding behind bandages or armor. I wasn't pretending to be the invincible alpha. I was Kaelen, the man who had walked through the fire to find his home. Sarah rested her head on my shoulder, her heartbeat syncing with mine. It was a calm, steady rhythm, the rhythm of a life that was finally ours to define. I leaned down and kissed her, a deep, lingering promise that tasted of sunlight and peace. We turned our backs on the ruins of the old world. We didn't look back at the throne. We walked into the sunrise, not as a king and his prisoner, but as two wolves, finally free to run together. The story of the broken alpha had ended. The life of the alpha and his queen had just begun. The end